Thank you all for having me today. I'll start out with a question. Can you remember the first time that in a professional environment, someone felt the need to let you know that what made you different was louder to them than what made you successful? I see some people nodding. Obviously, we have a lot of examples of these things, but two things come to mind for me. I was at a holiday party for a company that I was working at maybe 6 or 7 years ago. End of the evening, everything's going really well, everyone's very relaxed, and a member of the C-suite finds it necessary to single me out in front of a number of my other colleagues with good intentions, put his arm around me and thank me for helping to make the management ranks less male and pale. His words, not mine, right? And I think a lot of people in the room know what my response was, which was to smile and sip my drink and move on with my day, secure in the knowledge that my willingness to bring my uterus and my skin to work were appreciated, right? Like I was gonna leave them at home, right? But no, never mind the millions of dollars that I made them, and it was millions. Another time I had, much earlier in my career, I had a job interview at a really prestigious REIT. Again, I'm not gonna name which one it was. The CEO of the fund told me he was sure I was the person for the job. He told me all the partners had voted yes. One man, however, had said, and I quote, "We can't hire her. She's so aggressive, I think she might actually eat her own children." And I was told that feedback. At the time, I think I was maybe 29. I didn't have any children yet. So they were safe, and the one I have now is safe. But, you know, it's the kind of thing that we all get really used to, right? And the truth is that a lot of people in the room know that even at that moment, I really didn't have any complaints. I didn't take it as an issue. I didn't make a big point about it because we get accustomed to these things. We build our armor when we're outsiders. I was in the running, and the important thing was to be in the running for the best job at the best firm because winners fight, winners don't whine, right? That's what we learn in real estate. Like many men and women of my vintage in this room, I didn't grow up at a time when you complained about these things. I thought it was the best thing to do to focus on the work. Show up early, stay late, don't wear too much eyeliner, right? These were the things. Don't spend too much time at the company happy hour, et cetera, et cetera. I did whatever I could to be sure that they had to see me before they saw see my work before they looked directly at me. And not until I had enough clout and background and demonstrated track record did I begin to believe that people would have to see past me to me. I focused on my work and I decided that it had to be enough because that was what it was gonna be. But things are different now. The whole world is different than it was. In 2019, the common conversation is very, very different, even in real estate, but also in the world at large than it was 20 years ago in the world into which I graduated. Times have changed, which is evidenced in no small part by the fact that the ULI saw fit to hold an event like this. That wouldn't have happened even 5 years ago. And that's kudos to the men and women that brought this event to ULI, but in particular to Louisville, and that were kind enough to invite me. So I'm so pleased to be here with you tonight, but I'm not here to talk about how hard it's been or how terrible people have been. I'm here to talk about what it means to be an outsider on the inside and what you can do with that, how you can use it. There are, to be clear, a lot of different ways to be an outsider. You could have a uterus, you could have a little more melanin than someone around you, you could be LGBTQ, you could be an immigrant, you could be older than everyone else at your firm. There are a lot of different ways to feel not included. You might just be the guy who kind of says something a lot of the time that rubs people the wrong way, but it sounded great in your mind, so you're no longer welcome at the water cooler, and you know who you are, right? But being an outsider is a very real thing, and regardless of what type of an outsider you are, you know who you are. So who am I? I am, as Serena kind of introduced, I'm an entrepreneur, I'm an author, and I'm a real estate industry veteran. I grew up in New York. I spent my childhood in a family with immigrants who put all their money into real estate and not the stock market because we didn't understand it. After college and grad school, I did end up in real estate. I spent the first 5-10 years of my career working in ground-up development, rehab, repositionings of hotels, senior housing, multifamily, and then I jumped over to the dark side and I did my time in private equity. And I ended up spending a lot of time on a plane, traveling around the world, overseeing asset management, all asset classes across the capital stack around the globe. I had a lot more energy then. Showing up at airports in different countries where there would be the driver holding the sign that said, Mr. Mathis. And I'd kind of walk up and smile and wait till he realized that he was waiting for me, right? And again, there's an armor, and you don't think about it, you don't complain about it, you certainly don't say anything about it. After a few years in that business, I decided to leave about 4 years ago to launch my first commercial real estate tech company, Stealth Force. It was to solve a problem that I was having when I was in private equity and to create a solution for it. It was essentially a company I would have hired had it existed when I had that kind of bank account. And I sold that in January, and now I'm in the process of launching a new venture that's actually going to be focused on co-working for parents in New York City with licensed childcare on site. So I've spent a lot of time in a lot of different parts of the real estate industry. I've been the person walking on the construction site where people are whistling at me, they don't realize they work for me, right? I've been the person who goes into the conference room and has somebody tell her their coffee order, right? And then what do you think I did? I think a lot of you know what I did, right? I gave them the coffee, right? Step out of the room, get the coffee, deliver it, because I'm nothing if not a good host, and then say, guess what? You're here to meet me, right? We still did the deal, but these are the types of things that you get used to. And, you know, as a result of having been in all these different spheres, I get to spend a lot of time on stage talking to people about the real estate industry. And one of the questions I get asked the most is, how is it different as a woman in real estate or in real estate tech? How is it different as a minority operating in these still very rarefied and very male-dominated and very white glove industries? And what I tell them is, things still have a very long way to go, but they've come very, very far. And I know some of you are nodding your heads, you've seen it only in the last 5 years, but going back 20, 30, 40 years, you know, our mothers didn't have half the shot that we do in this industry. And I think we all understand, no matter where you fall politically, no matter how you feel about different topics affecting America right now, that this is a critical time in the history of America. The reason, though, is not just because Republicans and Democrats are having their conversation or because race issues are coming up. I think the reason why a sea change is beginning to occur in America is because it is the first time when all different segments of outsiders have collectively and simultaneously found their voice. I think we have millennials to thank for that. And that's a topic for another talk. But I really do think that that is the reason why this particular time in America feels different. This speech is not about that. This speech is about the larger question of, this shift has bubbled something up to the surface. The collective voices are being heard. And I think it changes the way we need to think about how to use the opportunities that we have. The power structure in real estate is a very rarefied world. And if you're in this room, I think you recognize to begin with, even if you are an outsider, you are a part of the power structure. And regardless of how odd you may be in the room that you're in, you are still a part of a very rarefied world within America and within the world at large. So after about a decade of working in commercial real estate myself, I finally realized that I was looking at it all wrong. The question was not, what are the aspects of me being different that may be preventing me from being the best that I can be at this job? The question was, now that I have the seat at the table, what am I going to do with it? That should have been the question. I think a lot of us go into this industry, men, women, whoever you are, thinking you're going to do your best, but we get distracted by the feedback that we're getting from the universe around us. And it's easy to let that happen. So welcome to the challenge of being an outsider on the inside. Gandhi was an outsider on the inside, and obviously I have a soft spot for the guy, just one example, but it's not always that simple. So here's another example of the concept of an outsider. My husband is white, Lutheran, and from Texas. I am neither white nor Lutheran nor from Texas, right? I am Indian and Hindu and from New York. He's tall, I'm short. He's conservative, I am not. When we spend 10 days deep in the heart of Texas, which I love, eating some of the best pie and drinking some of the best sweet tea that I've had every Christmas, I would say I see about 2 people during the course of that actual week, or interact with 2 people during the course of that week who actually look like me. And they both assume I'm Mexican because they are. A lot of the time they assume I'm my son's nanny because that's life, right? But here's the other side of it. My husband lives in New York surrounded by a bunch of liberal, crazy, loud, don't know how to say ma'am kind of people. And when we spend time with my large extended Indian family on Long Island, which we do very often, I still have immigrant members of my family who've been here for 25 years who insist on speaking to Christopher Mathis in Hindi. No matter how many times I tell him, he really doesn't speak it. He's not going to learn it. He doesn't speak it. And they just keep putting the food in front of him. And God bless him, he has a good attitude about it. But there are a lot of different ways to be an outsider. Being an outsider, though, still has its benefits. For one thing, you become very accustomed to thinking ahead about the way that your comments are going to be received and how people are going to perceive you. You have to. You think twice before every comment. You reconsider the possible motivations of the people, for example, who you think might be trying to sabotage your career. You have to think first, second, 3 times about it because you don't want to overreact. You don't want to be painted to be difficult, right? And therein lies the power. If you can train yourself to see it as that, there is a clarity and a gravity to you as an outsider that if you can harness is extraordinarily powerful, and it can launch you to the top or to the head of whatever table it is you fought so hard to get to in the first place. In my experience, it basically involves 3 things. Number 1, listen harder. Number 2, see through the comment to the intentions of the person who made the comment and let them know that you do. And number 3, speak up, right? So the first one, when we talk about listening harder, as a person who's not typical for their environment, you are used to having people get only half of what you're saying some of the time. And while it may not feel like it, this constant irritation is actually a really good learning tool. Because, for example, rather than getting angry about the fact that someone assumes just because you're married, you must want to have kids and it's their right to bring it up, consider some of the assumptions you might be making about that person. Expressing a lack of your own presumptions to that person can sometimes be a better way to get them to open their minds than going back with, well, why do you think that about me? Why would you make that assumption? Coming from a place of humility and learning rather than coming from a place of attack obviously is going to get you further. The second one is really important, which is see through the comment to the intentions of the person making the comment. I'm going to use a bit of an inflammatory example. You have a coworker, and they think nothing of singing a little song that has some pretty racist undertones, or homophobic, or what, name the topic. Your instinct might be to cut their head off, right? Your instinct might be to dismiss them as naive. Your instinct might be to laugh it off and then go home and be kind of irritated about it. But whatever it is that they are doing, I think what you need to do, and this is very powerful, is take a step back first and say to yourself, is this person's intentions negative or are they naive? We can talk all day about whether being willfully naive is also malintended, but that again is another talk that I'm not qualified to give. It's probably a TED Talk somewhere. If you can actually take a moment to consider whether you think their intentions are really evil and hurtful, chances are your answer is going to be no. If you spend any time with this person in your life, chances are your answer to yourself will be no. If you can bring it up to them, ask to speak to them privately. Do not attack them in front of people. And then ask if they're willing to hear your perspective on it. You would be surprised. This is the most powerful thing that you can do. You would be surprised how quickly, whether or not they agree with you, people will become loyal to you if they believe that you understand that their intentions are not bad. Demonstrating to the insiders on the inside that you believe in their intentions is really critical to opening them up to their ability to see you more clearly and stop making the same assumptions about you. Now, third is the concept of speaking up. By a show of hands, have you all heard of the concept of groupthink? Right? If you haven't heard of it, you should definitely Google it. It's the concept that organizations and groups that spend lots of time together stop thinking as individuals and they start thinking as groups, and that can be detrimental. So those who are on the outside bring a unique perspective, and they are the only ones who are typically able to challenge systems that are in place that do need change. This is basically the whole reason why the organizational change consulting industry exists. But as a unique perspective on the inside, you not only have the chance to identify those problems, you also know how to maneuver the systems that are in place to affect the change. Again, think about Gandhi. I like the guy. If he had not been educated by the British, if he had not been raised in India, if he had not been back in India at that moment, having the arguments, seeing the system from both sides, having some empathy for the British, having a lot of empathy for the Indians, and then knowing how to speak to them in a language that they needed to hear, he would have never created the type of social change that he's created. So there is a depth of clarity that is available to you as the only X in the room that you have to constantly remind yourself of. Don't dismiss when you see that things need to change, but also don't undermine yourself by failing to use the tools that you have, because you are also an insider. It's not about fighting the system. Gandhi didn't go looking for a fight. You don't show up to the office every day looking to tell people what they're doing wrong. But it is very much about getting the success that you deserve. You go to the office every day and you do your best. Every once in a while, some sort of a comment is made and some sort of a reaction comes to you that makes it clear you're not getting perceived the way you'd like to. You let it slide off your back, but it is damaging you. And at the end of the day, I have found that if you can use these type of steps, and it's hard, swallowing your pride and not jumping down people's throats when they say things that you don't like. If you can find a way to do it, it's extraordinarily powerful, because I have found that authenticity delivered in a language that your audience can really understand is really respected by anyone whose respect is worth having. Chances are the person you're fighting with is someone whose respect you need. Otherwise, you wouldn't really care what they were saying. And more than anything, you are who you are because of every one of your parts. So when you think about deconstructing yourself, we all know we are more than the sum of our parts. If you are anything like me and you're an outsider in some capacity in your work environment, if you were given the choice to remove that part of yourself that made you different, you wouldn't take it. You know that it's a part of who you are. So use that critical ear and everything else that you have to your advantage when you can. Get smarter than the people in the room, not because you have to, not coming from a place of having a chip on your shoulder. Get smarter than the other people in the room because you can. You have a better opportunity than the people around you. Speak up in a language that they can understand. And if you still don't get what you want, man up and move on. I had to say man, right? I couldn't say woman up. Easier said than done, right? But I know that it's worth it. And on that point, I want to close with one particular anecdote that I think some of the younger people in the room might appreciate. I was working at a company at some point in my career, again, that I won't name, where I found myself very, very frustrated with the success that I was having and not having. I know, and I knew even then, that some of my frustration and lack of success was my own fault, because I was being a big dummy in a lot of ways. I also knew that some of my lack of success and frustration was due to the environment around me. But when I really sat around and thought about it, it was the roadblocks and the limitations that were being put on me that were not being put on the people around me that hurt the most, right? And that's what I was really railing against. So I had an opportunity to talk to a woman who was extraordinarily senior in the company, and I mean, she was very impressive. She knew that she was very impressive, but to this day, I don't think she knew how much awe she inspired in me. And I was very honest with her. And I said what I was thinking about doing and take this job and shove it and all that kind of stuff. And she says to me, Poonam, there are a lot of things that you can do with your life, a lot of places you can work, but you will never reach your full potential until and unless you can truly trust yourself and live with yourself. Because you will get a seat at another table, maybe a bigger one. And I will bet you lunch that if you do leave this place, A year from now, you will be so glad that you did. You know what? She was right. Those are the types of things that stick with you. So my hope for those of you in this room who have felt like an outsider is for you to recognize that you earned your seat at the table in this wonderful industry of real estate that we're all very blessed to be a part of. I want you to remember that you earned your seat. I want you to go out there and make the most of it. And know that you'll be fine no matter which table you end up with your seat at. I know I will.